Welcome to The Founder's Mind. This is your host, Adam Muchler. On this episode, Mandela S.H. Dixon, founder and CEO of Founder Gym, joins me. Founder Gym is an online training center for underrepresented founders who want to build a successful tech startup. Mandela dives into the story behind starting her company, what energizes her about her work, and how this is just the beginning. Listen in and learn some of the awesome lessons that Mandela has picked up along the way. I've been following your work from afar on social, and I know, we've had a little back and forth getting together, and I'm excited to sort of dig into what you're up to with Founder Gym. And I like a great starting point for me, and I think for guests, is just to hear from you, in your words, what you're working on and a little background.
Yeah, no, for sure. I am so glad that we are not quite in real life yet, but we are getting one step closer to Twitter chats. So this is good. This is progress. I am the CEO of a company called Founder Gym, and we are an online training center that basically teaches underrepresented founders on how to build successful tech startups. We operate in 6-week cohorts that are extremely selective, where we bring in the best of the best Silicon Valley and beyond venture capitalists and venture-backed founders to train up individuals who want to go to the next level in their development as a founder. And so we've operated 4 cohorts in our first 10 months of operation, and we've served 170 founders across 9 countries who've all gone on to raise about 2 million, not 2 million, oh my gosh, I should sell it short, but 20 million, 20 big ones, 20 million in venture capital. And so we're really proud of the progress we've made in less than a year, and our 1-year birthday is coming up. So we're super excited about that. But my background and how I got into this, just to make it super short, is, my name is Mandela. I was named after Nelson Mandela. I am likely one of the only women you've ever met with that name, let alone anybody. And so that can probably tell you a lot about my parents and the household I grew up in. Both of my parents were civil rights attorneys, and that colored my worldview in a huge way in terms of the way in which I have a deep sense of empathy for injustice and people who are disenfranchised and marginalized. And I have a deep empathy for other people and wanting to bridge the gap between where they are and where they can be. So that's always been ingrained in who I am. In addition to that, I've been an athlete my entire life. I played soccer since I was 5 years old, and I went on to be a captain of a Division I soccer team. And, that's also influenced how I've developed as a team player, as a leader, how I've utilized sports psychology, even as I've transcended in the business world. And then 2 other aspects that really have influenced Founder Gym and what I'm creating today is my teaching experience. So I was a 6th grade teacher in South Central Los Angeles, ended up getting my master's in education, and started to do my PhD in education. But Adam, I bumped into something called entrepreneurship.
What?
Yeah, my life has never been the same since then. And that was in 2011 at a Startup Weekend education event. I went with a friend and we presented an idea. It happened to be an education-themed event, and that idea ended up winning first place. And so that was literally the jump start for my journey in Silicon Valley for, what has now been the last 7 years. And so as the last part of this equation is my experience as a tech startup founder, raising venture capital in 2011 as one of the only women of color out Silicon Valley doing that at the time. And then going on and being a global director of Startup Weekend Education, and then most recently a portfolio services director at a venture capital firm called K4 Capital in Oakland. So in summary, all those experiences I basically have just jumbled up into, if I asked myself if I could do anything with my limited amount of time on this earth, my talents, my passion, what would I want to contribute? And this has become Founder Gym.
I love it. In that very succinct but comprehensive bio, which I greatly appreciate, I'm quickly discovering that an hour isn't enough, but we'll respect the time frame. And to give you an idea of why it isn't, after this call, I have a coaching conversation, but then I'm going to coach the high school soccer team that I coach in the fall. So we can get into a whole sports rant.
So cool. So are you a soccer player yourself?
I played soccer as a kid and through high school. Definitely not at the level that you achieved, but I'd see a lot of parallels. Some of them very obvious, and some of them not, between entrepreneurship and sports, and between any professional career in sports. And this is my third conversation today, and the third time that sports is coming up.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so if we need to do a part 2 of this, so
exactly.
Deep dive into the metaphors and analogies that could be transferred. Yeah, let's do it.
Exactly. And the other thing that you brought up, which I love, is you are not the first person who I've talked to who has sort of been in the educational space and transcended into tech and trying to make certain things more accessible, but through that lens of how do we teach people effectively and how do we engage people through learning, to whether it's level up, to acquire new skills, to complement existing skills. So I'm really excited to get into that. And I'd like to kind of go into where did Founder Jim, I know that, when you started thinking about how do you want to spend your time, on Earth and sort of the limited time that is a single life, but where did Founder Jim come from? How did it evolve from an idea into something?
Yeah, such a good question. Like, how is a sausage made? Okay. I had, and again, hindsight is 20/20, right? And so it's so easy for me to look back on my life and be like, oh my gosh, so this piece lent itself to the next thing. And the next thing, and wow, boom, I'm here, right? Yeah. It was much messier than that. And it was much more confusing. And it took me a lot of time to realize like how to culminate my lived experiences into one single idea that I could execute on. So I'm so happy you asked this question because it's not the fairy tale that everybody thinks it is. So how I came up with the idea was I had started, before Founder Gym, I was actually doing Founder Gym before it was called Founder Gym. I was doing private consulting. I was also doing an online course. And at the time, it was called Communicate Like a Boss, right? And I was teaching people how to basically leverage people skills, communication skills, leadership skills, to actually leverage that into a business opportunity. And so via that coaching experience, which was at the time 100% online, digital, I was like, oh my gosh, you can actually do online education better than what it's done currently. Because, a lot of MOOCs and online courses get a bad rap for lack of completion rates and, lack of engagement. And, so I kind of assumed that was the case. Like, can you really do online education well? And can people truly transform their lives? And I just dabbled in it a bit and I was realizing you absolutely can. And, I am fortunate that I have a background in education. I am a professionally trained educator, right? Yeah. And breaking down huge, complicated concepts into bite-sized pieces that are digestible to different types of learners and respecting where the learner is at in their journey at any given moment. Right? Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach. And so as I was dabbling in my own online course, I really just wanted to expand that. I had seen the magic. I had seen the power. And honestly, Adam, it was the most fun I had had in such a long time. Like, you have to understand, I hadn't taught since 2011, right? And when I started my online course, it was 2018? It was 2017. Yeah. And so it had 6 years has transpired since I was literally like in a structured teacher student role, right? And I just loved it. I really did. But I was now teaching adults instead of children. I was teaching entrepreneurship instead of math, science, and all the other stuff they had me teach. And it was that experience was like, I want to make this bigger. And I wanted it to be bigger than any in myself, right? So I intentionally did not name it under my personal brand of Mandela SH. I wanted something for the people, by the people, like something that would live on much longer than me. And so when I was coming up with the idea and the concept, again, like being the athlete I am and thinking about the analogies that work for me and how I train myself and set goals and how I look at things literally when we talk about the quarters of business, right? Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. I look at it like quarters of a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, wins or losses happen in the fourth quarter. And we're talking right now in the fourth quarter. No, I'm going hard in the streets. I'm going so hard right now because I want to close out the year. I want to win the game, right? And so all these things that I had just personally done to inform my own success in the industry, I just codified now. I had a brand behind it, Founder Gym. I codified into a concept of a gym and training. And the same way for physical endurance or flexibility or strength, right? That same level of intentionality and consistency and practice you bring to that health aspect of your life. It's the same thing you have to do in the business realm, right? And when you stop going to the gym and stop working out, the gains, you lose the game. And so it was a very natural thing for me to package all of that. And it honestly felt so right. And at this point in my journey where I've tried many things, I've helped hundreds and thousands of founders all over the world. So I've had the privilege of not just seeing the trees, but seeing the forest and what's really going on a high level in the ecosystem. And so I was waiting for something that I would be pulled by, right? I'm not forcing this, but what is speaking to my most authentic self? And what do I feel like I can be the best at the world at? And this felt natural to me. So anyway, went from that tinkering around with my online course and making a decision that I didn't want it to be a personal brand, that I wanted to be a larger company with other teammates. And then it was just about taking the steps. And have you read The Alchemist, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, like a long time ago. We're talking about the fiction books.
Yeah. If you remember that book at all, it's just talking about, once you realize what your dream is and like you come to terms with this is actually what I want to do in this life, then what normally happens is the universe will immediately test you, right? Like, how much do you really want this? So it was the same for my life. I had made this decision that I was going to quit my job. I was going to turn down all these other things to pursue this. And then immediately when I made that decision, I didn't tell anybody, I started getting the craziest offers from some of the largest tech companies in the world who were recruiting me. And again, it was so tempting. It was like, oh my gosh, these people want me there. They're creating this whole job for me. It's like the highest levels. It's like, all on paper, it looked like the dream opportunity. Like, how could you pass this up?
Yeah.
But what I realized was it was a test for me. It was like, all right, you decided and you did all of this personal work on who you are, what you want to do, and you made a decision. But now there's these external forces kind of putting the shiny object in front of you, and are you going to bite the bait,
Yeah.
And I did entertain it for a while. Like, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't like, I am so strong and resolved in my decision that I am going to turn down everything else. At first I was like, all right, well, let me take a peek. You know what I mean?
It's hard not to.
Yeah, we can have some conversations, see what's going on. But ultimately, I realized that was all ego, right? Like, I wasn't doing that because I really wanted to. I was doing it to get my ego stroked. I was doing it because I was still too reliant on external validation, right? Instead of having full faith in myself and what I'm able to do. And so ultimately, after a month or so of tinkering around with that, I decided, no, I turned down the opportunities. And I went headfirst into Founder Gym. I put in my notice at my job that I was going to do this, and of course, people try to convince you otherwise. But I was resolved. I had made up my mind that I was going to do this no matter what. And yeah, here we are.
That's amazing. You said so many things. Again, now I think we have at least 3 hours of things to talk about. Founders Gym, 10 months old, I guess you mentioned. It's been around for 10 months officially. $20 million raised cumulatively across, founders that have gone through your program. What was the inflection point? You had the name, you had, you wanted to create this brand that was bigger than Mandela, bigger than you, right? And What were the first couple months like? What was that first cohort? What was that first inkling of traction?
It was really hard. It's always easy to talk about in hindsight. Like Steve Jobs said this in that wonderful commencement speech. It's so famous, where he's like, "Oh, you can only connect the dots looking backward.
Exactly.
You can't looking forward." And it's so true. Oh my gosh, like it's beautiful. I can all package this nice into a story, but the reality is when it happened. Right, September is when I started working on it behind the scenes. And another thing that I did incredibly different than my first startup, and this is a huge mistake that a lot of founders make, is that they build the solution before they truly understand the problem and the people that have the problem. Right? Because at the end of the day, I don't care what business you have, you are serving a person, right? Even if it's a dog business, dogs can't buy your product. It has to go through human hands, right? In order to get to the dog, right? And so, what am I getting at is that I actually did a deep dive in a way in which I've never done before on customer research. I interviewed so many founders across all different spectrums of entrepreneurship, whether it was hobbyists, lifestyle businesses, small businesses, multi-level marketing businesses, tech startups, VC-backed startups, right? I really wanted to understand the mindset, the similarities and differences between these types of entrepreneurs. I interviewed women, I interviewed men, I interviewed Black founders, I interviewed Latinx founders, I interviewed white founders and Asian founders and Indian founders and LGBTQ founders and veteran founders. I mean, I really wanted to get a grasp on just the spectrum of diversity amongst founders and who in particular I wanted to serve to start with. And so out of everything I've done, I really had to then make a decision. All right, I've learned so much. Now, who do we want to serve, right? That's really, I think, a strong recommendation I would make for anybody wanting to start a business. It's not about you just building this gizmo and gadget and app. It's about understanding who are you passionate to serve, right? Who will get you up in the morning? You will be so happy if you can help solve their problems, right? And so that's fundamentally how I looked at building this business. It was something I don't think a lot of founders do, and it was something I had personally never done before when building a business. And it made all the difference, to be quite honest with you. And so I got very clear that I wanted to service tech startup founders, and particularly I wanted to service underrepresented founders. Underrepresented is just how we define it, is that your representation in the overall population is greater than what it is in the tech industry. So for instance, 50% of the population is women, yet only 10% of venture capital backed founders are women, right? So they are underrepresented in tech.
Severely.
So our group that we serve is extremely diverse, but they all share the commonality being underrepresented. They're all kind of and even Arlen from Backstage Capital, she uses the term underestimated, right? We're kind of saying the same things, but these are people who disproportionately not gotten access to the opportunity. And so with that now, right, that was kind of the first phase of what I had done to try to begin building then the solution. So now that I know the people I want to serve, I really understand the problems that they have. Now it comes down to, oh my gosh, there's so many problems. Right? It's open a can of worms. They're the problems are so deep, are so pervasive, are so long-standing. It's how the heck do I actually do this now? And so you have to be crystal clear on being intentional about doing one thing and being the best at that one thing before scaling it out and doing everything. So I then reflected on Elon Musk. I reflected on Jeff Bezos. I reflect on these people who've had these huge companies that are massively successful and peeled back. Well, how did they do that? If you remember Amazon was just a bookstore online. That was all it was at the beginning. And Jeff was testing a concept of, would people trust the internet enough and put their credit card information on the internet in exchange for a book, and believing that book would actually arrive within a week. Right? Yeah. He was testing trust amongst people, right? And then he was able to prove that out, and then he built upon that into other products now he's offering. And then he built out that into fulfillment centers, and now he's going to space, right? it starts with one thing to get the flywheel going and the momentum going. We are taking the same approach. What people see as Founder Gym today is not what it's going to be 5 years from now. We are just on page one of a very long book into how we are going about becoming the world's most number one trusted coach in the world for bridging the gap between where underrepresented groups are and where they want to be. And so the first test that we're doing is this cohort model of a 6 weeks, very intensive. Like, we do not play. We are like a boot camp. If you are about that life and you really want to change your life in the sense of how you build a business, we are the place for you, right? We don't riff-raff. We are serious, and we are for serious men. So that's who we're serving right now. We will expand beyond that, but that's the focus. And so I decided to give ourselves a year to perfect that model. And that's what we've been doing. So we just finished literally last Thursday, our final cohort of 2018, really trying to perfect that model. And what Founder Gym is, the cohort is in cohort 4 is not the same as what it was in cohort 1. Cohort 1 was 4 weeks. Cohort 6 is 6 weeks. Cohort 1 did not have certain elements of community that cohort 6 has now, right? So what you do is you do these small tests, you learn from those tests, and you iterate accordingly to constantly improve the experience that you're giving the end user. And so we literally eat our own dog food and take that approach with how we're developing and expanding what we're doing. But that was basically the first couple months, was like figuring out who I wanted to serve, then figuring out all their problems, then being like, holy shit, this is a lot. And then being like, okay, of all these problems, which one do I feel like I am most uniquely fit to serve, and which one actually am I excited about? And that's another thing, is that as a founder, you're going to be working way harder than you've ever worked in your life. I promise you. Don't believe me? All right, go be a founder and then call me. You're working so hard that you genuinely have to do something that you are fired up about, because it's just so hard. It is so incredibly hard. You'll be faced with so many obstacles. You'll be faced with so much self-doubt sometimes, that if you are not pulled by what you're doing, if you're not pulled by true, authentic passion, it's just not going to be worth it to you, and you will quit. I promise you. So it's not just about knowing the user, understanding their problems. It's about picking a problem that you're jazzed up to solve. And then you need to design an experiment that will try to solve that problem. And you continue to improve that experiment until you feel like you got the right recipe, right? From there, you can leverage the learnings to then scale to the next level. So that's what happened. It was very messy. It was very hard. It was very complicated, but I loved what I was doing so much. I didn't want to give up.
I mean, I think just focusing on the very last sort of comments about that passion and about being excited and energized by it, like that is, I agree. And just hearing you talk about it, like that's the fuel, right? This idea that it is messy and there are a lot of things once you start getting into it, right? There are a lot of things that you could be doing or that you could solve. And I think that's one of the biggest themes that come up in conversations when people talk to me about entrepreneurship. And you just mentioned it, but I'm echoing it, right? Mm-hmm. One of the biggest distinguishing factors between people that you end up hearing about and people that you forget about or you never even heard about is that maniacal focus, because there is this belief and energy that you almost can't help yourself but push it forward. Yeah. And that, the people that you mentioned, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, right? Like those guys are probably somewhere on the spectrum of a little crazy and very focused.
You are. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a real, about that life entrepreneur, you're absolutely crazy. Because being crazy is not being like the status quo. That's all it is. And that's a beautiful thing to be called crazy. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, because actually what I'm trying to do is what doesn't exist already. I need to be crazy in order to believe that something better can exist.
Well, it's so generative. I mean, it's you're willing these things into the world, and maybe they exist in different combinations and permutations, right? But you're willing these ideas and these services and product into the world that weren't there in that makeup. And when you start thinking about it like that, like you're creating things out of thin air. And
I love what you said, Adam. You're willing it. Like, it's just sheer will sometimes. And that's a beautiful phrase that you use. I love it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's what I observe. But it's also when you bring the stories like Jobs and Musk and Bezos, it also started somewhere pretty small, quote unquote, right? But small compared to where all of their things are today. And it also got me thinking about your focus where, you're starting with asking people to say yes to one thing or say yes to something that is smaller than what it might become. And then they get in the habit of saying yes because you keep delivering, right? Like ordering books online and they show up to your house. You're like, wow, that worked. And then they ask if they can deliver something else. You're like, sure, you got me my books. Why wouldn't you get me this other thing? And it grows and grows and grows, which is, I think that's also such a big thing. People often see the end results. People look at Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook or they look at Twitter and they say, wow, like, look how big these companies are and how big these brands are and how valuable they are. And it's like, do you remember what they were like in the very beginning? Like Twitter was like a text message relay service that went through your computer. Yep. And it was like rudimentary at best, right?
Yeah. And it takes a level of audacity to even dream that big and be willing to let your brain go that far. And I feel like that's actually one of the things that holds a lot of people back. Is that it's like, am I worthy of dreaming that big? Am I out of my league? There's all this self-doubt that pops up. And I feel like this is actually one of the biggest impediments to people who have these unlived dreams just dying within them, never seeing the light of day, is that you just have to have the audacity to be like, yeah, I'm going to say this. I know you may think I'm crazy, but I actually believe in this, right? And beyond that belief, beyond that audacity, it's just plain hard work. Like, I put in so much work. People would, again, the only person who probably ever really sees it up close is my husband.
Sure.
Because we live together. So he sees me around the day hours I put into everything that everyone just gets to see in a press release, right? Or the website, right? Like, there's an incredible amount of work. Not only I do, but I have an incredible team that I've tried to surround with to add their unique skill sets and superpowers to this movement. But it is. You know what I'd say to all the founders out there, you need to start wearing the label crazy as a badge of honor because I actually want to be known as someone who challenges the status quo and isn't willing to just adopt the world that I was born into, but I'm willing to question it, to push back on it, to believe in something better.
Well, I mean, hard work it really distills down to that. And I totally agree with you. And I think, there's on the internet, there's like, top 10 habits of successful entrepreneurs, the, 5 secrets to, growing your business, like all these lists. And for me, I think there's a really great opportunity for a parody where it's like, here are the top 10 secrets to success. Work your ass off for as long as humanly possible, just keep showing up.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
It is. Like, it comes down to work. A lot of people have good ideas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's not a secret. And it's also, there are people with ideas that are worse than yours that are more successful than you because they're just putting in the time and working and showing up and not quitting. It's not just, this magical thing where it's like, I have this incredible idea and I'll just talk to the right people and things will click, And I think that people understand that intellectually, but I think there becomes this space between, to your point, having this audacity that you could be that person that carries this idea to something beyond what you could even imagine. And
I feel like some people, and I'm going to say this, and it may be controversial, but I'm going to say it because I think a lot of people use other people's success as a cop-out for why they can't be successful.
Sure.
they will point and be like, oh, well, they had this or they had that. Or and I'm like, yeah, all that's true. This is not a level playing field. The cards are not always stacked in our favor. Absolutely 110% true, valid facts, right?
Yeah.
And still, right? That's my question. And still, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? And so I feel like sometimes people get comfortable with letting external factors dictate what they can or cannot change about their own life. And that's why I'm also a proponent about personal responsibility. The only person who's responsible for your happiness, your success, your fulfillment in this lifetime is YOU, the person looking at you directly in the mirror. And until you realize that reality, you're going to continue to let yourself be at effect by what's going on outside of yourself and use that as an excuse for why you can't do something. So yeah. I have a lot of empathy, but I also don't like a lot of excuses, right? And it's a point where sometimes you just have to hold the mirror up to somebody and let them know and call them out on their BS, call them out on their excuses. Because if you don't do it, who else will, right?
Well,
because they still maintain these excuses because they're constantly reaffirmed by the people they hang out with. Of, yeah. But sometimes, and this is a role Founder Jim plays for our founders too, is sometimes we have to call out the excuses other people are making so that they can finally let go of them and realize and take the reins of their life.
I think that's a very powerful point, and what it brings to me is a mantra that I talk about with clients, that I talk about with anyone that will listen, actually. And I learned this from another coach, is awareness creates choice. And until you're made aware of what you're doing or how you're talking about something or how you see something, you might not actually know that you have a choice. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's an element that you create a lot of awareness in the work that you do, and that people might end up getting to a conversation with you where someone didn't do that for them. And for you, and this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, your parents created a lot of awareness in you about your potential, about, what your options are in life, or that you can create your own options. And that gave you a lot of choices, regardless of where you come from, right? Mm-hmm. If you are aware that you can be in control, all of a sudden your choices open up, including generating your own opportunities, right? And I think that I feel similarly about, the reaction that you had about people say, well, they had this, they had that. But also the truth is no one is destined to be the richest person in the world. And no one is destined to be Michael Phelps, right? And your point about press releases echoed a comment from Angela Duckworth in her book, Grit. She also has a TED Talk. I don't know if you've seen the TED Talk or read the book.
No, I have.
I think you would really like it. I'm just going to start there.
What's it called?
Grit.
Grit. Okay.
It's just gonna sort of affirm a lot of the things that you already believe, but it might give you some other language or context, or give you something you can give to people and say, this is what I'm talking about. Read this. But what she talks about, and you mentioned this in when people see press releases, they see a fraction of the story, is we watch the Olympics every 4 years, and we see people break records, but we don't see the 4 years of 10-hour-a-day practice and work that go into being able to perform for 30 seconds in a way that breaks a record, which is like the pinnacle of this analogy, right?
Yeah.
No one was given that. They worked so hard for it. A lot of people work that hard to also be beat. Not everyone gets that record. There are a finite amount of spots, right? Anyways, we could, I think, as we mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, we could talk, and I think we will talk, about a lot of things for a lot of hours. I have a couple more minutes, and I want to be respectful of our time.
Sure.
So one question is, what's a piece of advice that you've received in your Founder Jim experience as the CEO that you found really impactful?
All right, there's so many. You have to understand, our whole business is around getting advice and dropping gems all day. So there's so much. But me personally, what I have found impactful, Okay, there's one thing that I actually think is true, but I shared it, and then there's another thing that another person said that I fully support. The first one is just what I fundamentally believe is that it's not about you. It is not about you. And the sooner you understand that being a good founder, being a good leader, being anything good to successful will require you to make it about other people. And that understanding what are their motivations, what are their interests, and then aligning yourself to servicing that, being of service to other people will lend you to a very lucrative career. That's my piece of advice. And I highly recommend, if you have not read yet, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Number 2 thing, something Michael Seibel, the CEO of Y Combinator, said, and it's a little, is curse words okay? I think I already
Go for it. Yeah, weird.
All right, he's just like, just fucking launch. And it literally just fucking launch. Like JFL, just do it.
JFL.
JFL, just do it already. Get it out of your head, because you will learn so much faster if you just do it. More than likely, you will stumble, you will fall, you will get scraped up and bruised up. It will happen, but that's how you learn what works and what doesn't. And it's also how you become stronger.
I love that. A friend of mine who's a muralist, Mariano Arian, he has a sticker that he made that he gave me, which is just JF DI, just fucking do it.
Okay.
It's on my laptop. It's just a JFDI.
Yeah.
I think that's a great ending point for this conversation. Final question for the people that are listening, for people that want to find you, that want to follow your story, that want to follow Founder Jim, or even, enroll. What are the best ways to get in touch or to follow along?
Yeah, so we are constantly adding additional cohorts to our offerings. And so what I recommend is just going to foundergym.com. We currently have 2 cohorts that are launching in January. One, for the first time, will be exclusively for Black founders. The other one will be open to all underrepresented founders. So whatever your preference is for learning style, you now have more options. That's one. But also, I'm really big on Instagram. I love talking to my folks and dropping gems on a daily basis. So my handle is Mandela SH. You can definitely find me over there. And then where Adam and I met, and this beautiful fruition now, this podcast is happening, is over on Twitter. And again, same handle, Mandela SH. But I love to interact with people. I love answering questions. I love giving back and being of service. So if I can do that for you, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Mandela. I'm very excited to share this with people, and I'm looking forward to future conversations, because I think there will be many.
For sure. And thank you so much, Adam, for creating the space and the platform to have these conversations. It's really important, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back next week to learn all about Remy's entrepreneurial journey and what she's cooking up with Me Time, and why she's all in on creating resources to reduce stress and anxiety in life. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. Last but not least, thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make The Founder's Mind possible.
In the world, going through all of this insanity, and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, Founder's Mind is what you see. Founder's Mind is what you see.